Hello and welcome to Public Forum. I'm Amandra Bhatt. Today we talk about the rising tensions between India and Pakistan. This after an outraged Indian government summoned the Pakistan High Commissioner yesterday to lodge its protest against the killing of 2 Indian soldiers near the line of control. Their bodies badly mutilated by troops, India says, had intruded from the other side. India has called the act barbaric, inhuman and unacceptable and has demanded a probe by Islamabad. Pakistan has dismissed India's allegations as baseless and says it is ready for a probe provided it is within the ambit of the UN. Today in Public Forum, we discuss India's options to deal with this issue and whether the killings of the Indian Jawans will dent the Indo-Pak peace process. And to discuss the same, we have with us in our studios 3 distinguished guests. Please welcome Mr. Sreeram Chaulia, Dean with Jindal School of International Affairs. Welcome to Public Forum, Mr. Chaulia. How do you look at Pakistan's response? Pakistan basically saying none of this ever happened, saying that India violated the ceasefire to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, even before if you just turn back a bit, before the response, what is the motivation? Why are they doing this, in such cold-blooded, brutal fashion? This is something to be considered. I mean, this is against the laws of war. This is against laws of civilized conduct.
Right.
And our forces have never engaged in this sort of brutality. And, clearly we need to see the response is in many ways a cover-up for the fact that, extreme fundamentalist forces have been released on the border. You could call them, regular troops or irregular troops or allied, forces or non-state actors for that matter. The fact is that, it's happening in the background of firing across the border and in the context of repeated ceasefire violations that have been on an uptick in the last few years. And all of this, so the question is, on one hand you have the civilian side of the government that's making all these tall promises of a better future for us, inviting our prime minister. On the other hand, it also claims that the army is on the side of a final settlement, while it clearly is visible. I mean, this action of the the killing and the beheadings and so on, surely would not probably have come all the way from GHQ, from the headquarters in Rawalpindi, but definitely the regiment commander, the Baloch regiment or the special operations group or whichever is operating right there, it would definitely have come under orders. It was clearly pre-planned. It was a premeditated attack rather than a spontaneous act of revenge for an earlier killing that they alleged that the Indians had done through firing. So the response, in many ways, we have to factor this in, is a way of shrouding over illegal, immoral and totally unacceptable conduct.
Absolutely.
That's has been ongoing.
So you're saying this becomes all the more important for us in the light of the events in Afghanistan, the fact that it is entering a decisive phase now. Mr. Chaulia, would you agree with the Ambassador Shukla's assessment?
Sure. I mean, the two have always been connected. In fact, Pakistan can be, in geographical terms, be seen as a kind of a conduit for the movement of these Islamist forces from Afghanistan all the way into Kashmir and back. And in that sense, I think the US withdrawal, the impending one, is obviously going to free the Pakistan military much more to, I think, refocus on India. And on, I think we should be prepared for, a return to some kind of insurgency and high-level infiltration across the LOC in the coming 2 to 3 years, because as you know, Kashmir Valley has been relatively speaking quiet in the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But I don't see that lasting very much because the Pakistan military had been preoccupied. I don't credit this period of quiet across the LOC, relatively speaking, to any kind of benign intentions or change in attitude, but rather it was circumstantial.
Right.
And it was a structural pressure that the Americans were bearing down upon them, which is likely to come down once this war is wound up on the other side. So we have to really brace for what I would say is the low intensity conflict we've always been talking about could become a medium intensity one in the coming few years. And if just going back to the brutality part, I wanted to add, the ideology is so clear here. Bangladesh Rifles, 2001, there was an incident on the eastern border where 16 BSF were killed, and all their bodies were mutilated. With the Chinese, we keep having these incursions, which the media reports, and as you know, it's a big public relations disaster. The government tries to quiet it, where there are frequent incursions on both sides, and there's this on the LAC, the line of actual control, the Chinese side, and on the eastern front. But you have rarely heard of any story of this kind of brutality being enacted by the Chinese on Indian soldiers.
Right.
So clearly, when Bangladesh, Pakistan is involved, what is the common factor is the Islamist, fervor. So this clearly means that it's not really an army in a conventional sense.
Okay.
And therefore, how do we deal with an unconventional army like this?
Right.
That is really the challenge for India.
Okay,
and
so
what are the
what
unconventional
could
means
be
we can use?
Right. Program, what's your question?
Ma'am, namaskar.
Namaskar.
My question is that yesterday I was watching in some channel. Actually, the problem is that the political peoples are playing this seesaw game. That is, they were blaming each other, throwing mobs to each other. So, very sorrowful I am saying that the clarion call of the day is to move on the issue of the safety of India. But instead of mulling on the issue of the safety, they are playing their own political games. Yesterday, some BJP and Congress, that ministers, they were blaming each other. Second thing, I want to know what will be the visa deals of Pakistan. Thank you.
Or we lost the caller, it seems. Mr. Chaulia.
Sure. The first thing, obviously, politicization of terror, it happens not only in India, in the United States, elsewhere too. But one must remember something. 90,000 prisoners of war during the Bangladesh war, we returned them in one piece, without mutilation, without torture. 90,000, right? And we must remember that. So, in terms of reciprocity in war, in conduct of war, there's always a notion of reciprocity. But we cannot go beyond certain civilized norms.
Right.
So, at the tactical level, I was speaking to a lieutenant general who was in the Mendar sector. He said, at the tactical level, we are going to open up several lines and we are going to keep firing. But the point is, that's obviously not going to deter them because they also have artillery to match us. Where does the artillery come from? How can a bankrupt state, nearly bankrupt state, keep on buying such sophisticated conventional weapons, not only light arms, fighter jets, and so on? So we have to question the international alliance pattern of Pakistan. Especially, I think it is high time, after this provocation at least, for us to openly question American military assistance, which has been blind, not smart, and which is, in excess of $15 billion in the last 10 years. And that has also freed up Pakistan to build its nuclear arsenal out of nothing. How can a state that's dependent on foreign aid continue to build its, do vertical proliferation of its nuclear weapons? So, with the confidence of the nuclear weapon gap, that apparently they enjoy a higher number of bombs than we have, and then all this conventional aid, where is it being misdirected? So this is really a question for us to ask. On one hand, we say we will lean upon the Americans to pressure Pakistan. The point is, the Americans and the Pakistanis have been in bed for a long time. So it's a question of, when we say we are strategic partners with the United States, this should be on the table. And we make noises about American aid and we criticize it and we say there should be stipulate more conditionalities to what the Americans give to Pakistan. The point is the Americans should realize, and I'm sure they do, that there is a direct link between their beefing up of Pakistan's military and these kind of actions. You cannot separate the two. It comes from that self-confidence that we were talking about earlier. So even after the war in Afghanistan winds up, if the old habit of continuously arming and funding Pakistan keeps going from Washington, I'm afraid we are in for a long, drawn-out battle in which it looks like the ultimate intended or unintended consequence of American actions is actually to keep India down and to keep us bottled up.
Right. But which is why, as Mr. Pal Chaudhary also said, our response at this juncture matters. How do you think India should respond?
Well, I think, clearly there will be, there is a military hotline on the border between the two sides. They exchange information and so on. They will, if you think about the forces on the ground in the harsh winter, clearly they will be itching for, to pay back. And, the army always says that, we are always restrained by civilian leaders in India, unlike in their side where it's an army in the possession of a state.
Right.
We have a state with a responsible army. So a responsible army will have to use, some forms of, retaliation and, at least to create a sense that the lives of the boys are not, completely expendable. So that will happen at the tactical level on the ground. But at the policy level, we will need to, as the other speakers have said, we will need to think about various means, including, General, Padmanabhan used to talk about, hitting at the terrorist training camps across the border and so on. I think those options a hot pursuit. All kinds of things have been spoken about. I'm sure the state has capabilities. Commodore was mentioning that there's also the need for political will to be married with the capabilities in order for the response to be really credible and to attain compellence, deterrence, whatever we want to call it, raise the cost. So, a combination of the two. I don't really, the caller is justified in saying that these are political games and that we are just, hurling abuse at each other. And the point is, I think we must listen to corps commanders, to regiment units, and, it's, at the end of the day, it's their lives. We can sit at comfort in Delhi and pontificate about it. So, they will need to have, some kind of, well thought out action plan, not only to deter these in the form of greater fire cover, but also the tunnels were being dug out in Samba sector a few months ago, deep into Indian territory. So, how do we respond to these? We will need to have our own people on their side. I'm not talking about tit for tat. We'll never do what they did. But what I'm saying is that is how you send the message across that on the ground level.
Afraid I have to leave it at that. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming to the studios. Mr. Sreeram Chaulia. That's it for now in this edition of Public Forum. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.